Hello! I'm LegenTerry, and these are my first impressions of the remastered classic Western RPG, The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion, co-developed by Virtuos Studios and Bethesda and published by Bethesda. So I'm doing something I haven't done in a long time. I think the last time I did this was Hi-Fi Rush. It's been a long time. Just doing this completely live. I have a few notes here. I don't really have a script, but honestly, I just don't have time to write a script because it would take me a week to get this out, and there is just way too much going on for that to happen. You know, this shadow dropped. We all knew it was coming, we just didn't know exactly when. New Monster Hunter Wilds content just came out, and I'm 2 months late on that review already because I had to rewrite the script a bunch to fit how much time I was spending playing it. The Marathon Closed Alpha just started, Switch 2 pre-orders are coming out, Clear Obscure Expedition 33 is coming out, new season of Andor just started, just way too much happening all at the same time. Just living in the embarrassment of riches. But anyways, you're not here for any of that, you're here for this game. This is The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion Remastered. It's developed by Virtuos Studios in collaboration with Bethesda. You may not have heard of Virtuos Studios. They operate mainly out of Singapore, and they're really known for like outsourcing additional work for games and porting games to other platforms. They're currently working on the Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater as well, but yeah, they're not really a name that you hear thrown around a lot. But that might just change pretty soon if the quality of this remaster is anything to go on. Almost called it a remake. They're not calling it a remake, they're calling it a remaster, but there's just so much additional work put into it that it feels like a remake. We'll get into that pretty soon. Now, Oblivion is the first game that got me introduced into the Elder Scrolls series. I went on to play the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, just like everybody else on the internet. I know I'm not special for that. I dabbled a little bit with the early games with Arena, Daggerfall. I didn't really get around to Morrowind, kind of regret that at this point. But yeah, just booting this game up flooded me with so much nostalgia. Like, me and my cousin used to play the hell out of this game almost every weekend that we got the chance to. It's just the kind of game that you get immersed into, it just sucks you in and does not let you go. You forget to eat meals, and just the time flies by. And I can already say right now, like, I can feel its grips around my throat just strangling me for my time, which is unfortunate because, again, I don't have a lot of time. Expedition 33 comes out tomorrow and I want to pay attention to it, but I've got this game from my childhood come back from the dead, and it's got a brand new shiny coat of paint and it's got a bunch of improvements. But yeah, I guess we should go ahead and start talking about this game proper. If you've somehow avoided the monolith of a series that is the Elder Scrolls your entire life, or, you know, if you're like in your early 20s, the Elder Scrolls games are massive open world RPGs. You make a character, you take on a bunch of quests, you go on a grand adventure, and explore whichever province the game is set in. In the case of the Elder Scrolls IV, that would be Cyrodiil. That's probably a little confusing because the game is called Oblivion, and most of the other games are named after the province they're set in, but we'll get to that later. There are a handful of guilds or factions that you can align yourself with, and sometimes doing stuff for one group will make the other groups unhappy. It's really all about the roleplay and how you want your character to be known by the rest of the world. You could be a big green orc warrior who smashes everything with a hammer, or a sneaky Argonian thief who steals loot and jabs people from the shadows with a dagger, or a high elf wizard that casts elemental magic and summons allies to protect themselves, or anything in between. Now, Oblivion was really special for its time. It was one of the first open world games to do a lot of cool things pretty well, and while it was on PC, it was also a launch title for the Xbox 360. That means it introduced a lot of folks to the open world formula. It did some revolutionary stuff, like giving NPCs an entire schedule to operate by, letting enemies chase you past loading screens and into buildings, and making all the items in the game physics-based objects that interact with everything around them. These also led to a lot of the goofy, emergent gameplay elements that other sandbox games today take advantage of, and a lot of people take for granted. So the Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion Remastered, it's not a complete overhaul. It's still running on the base engine that they used all that time ago. The Creation Engine, Radiance Engine, whatever they've renamed it, I've lost track at this point. But essentially, they're kind of running it through like an emulation layer inside of Unreal Engine 5, which it just sounds kind of crazy. They have essentially two engines running at the same time, just one is layered over top of the other one. And what that allows them to do is they can keep the core of the game intact, so the original stuff that you remember is still there, but they're able to adjust the visual identity. Like, they completely remastered every single asset in the game, so all of the models are brand new, all of the textures on them are brand new, and especially the lighting, man, the lighting is insane now. They've given us stuff like ray tracing, you get the god rays from the sun, all the lighting has physicality now, it's not just baked in shadows on the ground and on the other spaces. But yeah, their mission statement was kind of like, we want to keep the soul there, we want to keep it the same game that you remember playing, but we want to make it look a lot better, and we want to make it play a little bit better. And that is exactly what they did here. Just from like the moment that you boot it up, you hear that amazing music come in, it just hits you like a pound of bricks, and then you see the camera fly through the Imperial City, and you see Uriel Septim, and the way he looks now, he looks like an actual old man. Like, he doesn't look like he's like 40 and they just slapped a fat suit and a bunch of makeup on his face. Like, he actually has lines and wrinkles, and he has his cheeks sort of drawn in to show his age, and he's still being voiced by Patrick Stewart. Like, they kept all that in. And then you get into the character creator and you just make whatever abomination you can, just, you know, spend the obligatory 1.5 to 2 hours messing around.
You are the one from my dreams.
You fight your way through all the rats and the skeletons in the sewer, and you step outside and it's like, wow, yeah, this is pretty much the Oblivion experience from 2006. It just looks a hell of a lot better. You know, there's been a big change in the direction for the colors. Like, if you saw the original version of Oblivion, it was very, very blown out. Everything was super saturated and green. They've toned it back to make it more realistic, but it still has like the original artistic integrity. You know, it's what they were aiming for, they couldn't really achieve on the Xbox 360. And I know there's going to be a ton of people who disagree with that. They're going to be like, wow, so you essentially made Oblivion look like every other game on the Xbox 360 generation. Like, everything looks brown and dark and gritty. And to me, it's like, not really. It still has that sort of like magical quality to it. It's just been brought up to date. Like, it doesn't feel like you're looking through a lens that's been smeared with Vaseline. The grass and the trees, they look like actual grass and trees now, like actual foliage. It doesn't look like somebody ran around and splashed a bunch of fluorescent paint on top of them. And I kind of mentioned it earlier, but like, all the faces were completely re-rigged too, including like all the different races. So the Argonians and the Khajiit, they have their own lip movement now, so it's not tied to like whatever the Imperial model was or whichever one they used. And they also re-recorded the dialogue and the voice lines for those more exotic races. I think most or all of the important characters really have sort of kept their original voice acting, but for the characters who aren't super important, like the NPCs that just randomly run around the cities and the towns, they've had new voice actors step in and re-record all that dialogue, so it doesn't feel like you're just talking to the same person over and over and over again, you know?
Good day. Hello.
Outside of the voice acting, I'm pretty sure they've kept all the original music. At least I'm pretty sure it's the same. They may have done a little bit of like dynamic processing on it to change the way it stands out from the background. Or maybe it was like something that they had to do to decompress the soundtrack that makes it sound just a little bit different. Like, I think it has a little bit of tinniness in some sections, but I'm pretty sure they didn't like completely reorchestrate or re-record any of it. And like I said before, since they were trying to preserve the original experience, there's still a lot of like the weird audio bugs and stuff that happens. A lot of the noises are way too loud compared to the other noises. Like, you walk into a town whenever an hour shifts and the bells start ringing at the clock tower, and it's just super, super overbearing compared to everything else. You still have a lot of the funny audio cues, like whenever a character notices you when you're stealthed and you still haven't been completely revealed, they'll be like, oh, must have been the wind. And they'll just keep repeating that dialogue over and over if you just barely move a little bit at a time.
Hello? Cut down on the ale. Starting to see things, I am. Guess it was nothing. Huh? Hello? Who's there? What's that? Hello? Who's there?
But yeah, that's Oblivion, man. That's how it is. Now, they have changed some of the stuff when it comes to quality of life and when it comes to the combat. I'm sure you've noticed by now, but like the HUD and the UI are completely changed. They made them so much better for modern audiences. Back in the original, you went to go hit a target and you would just get this tiny little bar above where you were hitting with a crosshair that determined their health. Now it's like they actually have a health bar whenever you hit them that appears at the top of your screen. Your own health, fatigue, and magic bars are way more apparent than they used to be. The compass displaying all of your objectives is now at the top of the screen, like it is in Skyrim, so it's much easier to keep track of rather than being down at the bottom left corner. Some of the stuff might feel like it has a little bit less flavor than it used to have because it doesn't have that fancy little fantasy border around the edges and stuff. But overall, I would say that it looks better, at least to me. Now what's weird is that the menus kind of take a step back for some reason. I remember there used to be like subcategories for items. Now when you go into your inventory, it's just like you have your weapons, your armor, your consumables, your key items, and then an all category. But there's no longer like subsections for each of the items. So whenever you'd go into your consumables, you would have like material components and potions and poisons. But for some reason that just doesn't exist anymore. Hopefully they address that and change it in the future. Because right now, like the easiest way to find things is to remember which category it's in and then sort it like from A to Z to find it. It's kind of counterintuitive. To me, that's probably like the worst aspect of this remastered edition. And like if that's anything to go on, that's a very, very minor occurrence. There's just so much more to actually like about this than there is to not like. For instance, they introduced sprinting, which it just boggles my mind to think like, wow, back in Oblivion, we did not have sprinting. You had to walk very slowly everywhere or you had to get a horse. It was like such a good change to me because like when you're inside of a dungeon, you couldn't rely on a horse. If you had very low agility or very low speed, I think it's speed is the category you use, you just were very, very slow moving through it, especially if you were a big tanky character like I rolled this time. And God forbid you had to like backtrack through a cave that was really long. Because like not only were you contending with how big this cave was, it was also super dark and there's multiple pathways leading in different directions. And you make one wrong turn and it takes you twice as long to get back to the entrance. It also reminds me in like caves and darker spaces, I think there's more ambient light now. I've never actually felt the need to pick up a torch and use it or use like a Night's Eye potion or that one spell that puts light on yourself. Maybe it's because everything's just a little bit clearer, like again, it doesn't feel like I'm looking through a screen that's been covered in Vaseline. I've had maybe a few moments where it's like something's a little bit too far in the distance that I can't make out what it is until I actually shoot it with a bow or hit it with a spell. But for the most part, it hasn't really felt like I've needed to take extra steps to see what I'm doing in the dark. Maybe that says something about the new atmosphere of this version of the game, but besides like full-on role-playing, like you're playing as a super stealthy character and you don't want to see yourself in the shadows, it doesn't really affect that much. Like you could just as easily go back to the original version and like crank up the brightness of your TV or your monitor, and it would generally have the same effect. It's just like how immersed do you actually want to feel, you know? While you have the camera in third-person mode, they've added a targeting reticle outside of stealth mode. This makes it a lot easier to see where you're aiming your swings, and more importantly, your magic or your arrows. They've also added new animations to your character while in third-person mode, which was kinda necessary since they added sprinting, but also so you don't just weirdly hover in the air anymore whenever you jump. That was always really weird looking in the original game. This also applies to the horses, who move a lot more naturally while you're mounted and control a little bit more smoothly. Now, one thing I was kind of curious about, and I know I'm kind of jumping around between topics here, but in the story, you're essentially this hero that comes out of nowhere. You're trying to find Uriel Septim's secret son and save him from the forces of Oblivion. And Oblivion is basically the Elder Scrolls parallel to Hell. And in the original version, going into the plane of Oblivion, it really sucked for a couple of reasons. I mean, firstly, back when I first played Oblivion, I was still a kid, so like this place was scary as hell, like actual hell, you know? But besides that, just like the first time you get close to one of these gates, and anytime you go into one, as soon as you see the skybox and get a glimpse of that bright, bright red sky, it just kind of burns your retinas, you know? It hurts to look at. And I always found it weird because this is like what the game is named after. The whole point of the game is that you're going in and destroying these gates to stop the Oblivion crisis. But nobody likes to go to Oblivion because Oblivion sucks and it burns your eyeballs. In the remastered version, I think they have toned it down just a little bit. It doesn't feel like there's that super, super high contrast where everything was red and then everything in front of that red was black. And it makes the experience of exploring these areas way less oppressive feeling than it did before. You're still going to be fighting imps and clanfears and Dremora, and the plants are still going to come to life and smack you in the face when you're not expecting it the first time. The big pools of lava and the towers looming in the background are still really crazy and scary looking, but the space just feels way less annoying to actually traverse and move through. Now, the biggest change in the remastered version of the game probably comes with the leveling system. In the original, it had this really dynamic and interesting system where you would just get better at things by doing those things. So for instance, if you wanted to level up your athleticism, you would walk everywhere or you would swim. If you wanted to level up your destruction magic, you would use destruction magic. If you wanted to level up your heavy armor skill, you would get hit while wearing heavy armor, etc, etc, etc. Well, that part remains unchanged. It was one of the coolest systems in the original game, and it's still here and it's still really cool. But what they have changed is the weighing that the system does between each individual skill based on whether you've picked it as a major skill or a minor skill. Leveling up the major skills that you picked at the beginning of the game now give you much more experience than the minor skills do. So say if you're playing as a tanky character like I've chosen, it's much more beneficial to level up my blade and my blocking and my heavy armor than it is to say like sneaking or mysticism or lockpicking. You'll still get a minor experience bump from leveling those up, but they don't feel completely necessary to level up any other character now. It's like my tank doesn't have to moonlight as a thief or a mage to progress in the game now, you generally get the experience doing what you normally would do. And now, whenever you gain enough skill points to level up and go to sleep, you get 12 stat points that you get to choose where to allocate yourself. You can still only put a maximum of 5 stat points into one field per level, but you aren't bound by the skills that you boosted before leveling up anymore. Of course, this wouldn't be Oblivion or a Bethesda game if we didn't talk about the glitches.
All of this just works. I'm not kidding.
The game runs pretty smoothly. There are a few little rough patches, like some hiccups and some visual messiness with like VSync and with frame generation. I'm not really sure which settings I need to adjust to get like a perfect frame rate, but I have heard the stuttering is like an overall thing with the game that happens, not just on my system. So if you're on PC, your mileage may vary. But as far as the old glitches, there are still some of the glitches that were beneficial, and some of the glitches that weren't beneficial were taken out. We have all of the content from all of the DLCs inside this game, so including the Knights of the Nine and the Shivering Isles expansions. We also have the other, I think it's 7 expansions worth of content. Well, they fixed like some of the NPCs getting stuck or being put in situations where they couldn't actually give you access to the stuff inside the DLC, so that's good. But on the flip side, they fixed the notorious paintbrush floating glitch, and I may never forgive Virtuos or Bethesda for this.
What?
Some of the out-of-bounds glitches and some of the duplication glitches were patched out, but surprisingly enough, even more were created, so that's fun. It's kind of so easy to do on accident. I kind of did it the first time and didn't realize it, and then I saw news articles and people talking about it online and went back into the game, and I was like, oh yeah, that happened. Okay. So if I said that I didn't use it at all, I'd be lying just a little bit. I've tried not to take advantage of it too much because I don't want to taint my run and make it way too easy. But for certain small things like lockpicks, they're just kind of annoying to go and find more, to go and buy more, so I've given myself a few of those extra ones. I don't think they'll patch this out because it was in the original game, so it's kind of in the spirit of the original game to keep it in. If you want to use it, it's still there. If not, you can just totally ignore it, act like it doesn't exist. As a man once said, you control the buttons you press. The last thing that they really changed, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to roll a sword and shield tank character, is the combat. And I'm not saying that they changed too much, but what they did is they made it feel a little bit more lively by adding more animations. Back in the original version, when you'd hit an NPC, they wouldn't really react to you hitting them. They would just kind of stand there and then they would start swinging again, and it didn't really feel like you were fighting an enemy as much as you were fighting a stick figure, you know? Now when you're fighting somebody head to head, it's like you're actually in a fight with somebody. It's a little bit more engaging. Enemies will actually recoil and stumble backwards a little bit whenever you hit them. Generally, when I'm playing an RPG, I sort of lean towards the characters that do magic, because it's something you don't really get to ever experience anywhere besides video games. So back when I played the original Oblivion, I was playing like a Dark Elf Mage, and then I tried a Khajiit Thief. I didn't really get around to doing like the swordplay and stuff because it just didn't look that enticing. There were always times when you were kind of forced to interact with the game that way, like anytime that you ran out of magicka, or if you weren't as stealthy as you needed to be and you had to come out fighting. but it just never really felt good to do melee combat in Oblivion. And I gotta say, it still doesn't feel great, but it's tolerable now to the point where I don't mind doing it. The hitboxes on enemies are still really wacky, and it never actually feels like you're swinging towards where your reticle is aimed, and if you move a little bit to the side, you end up swinging sideways. It's still kinda messy. And I almost completely forgot you can't dual wield in this game. So if that was your plan, you're gonna have to settle for a two-handed weapon, or a sword and a shield, or a mace and a shield, something like that. I don't doubt that they could have found a way to implement dual wielding, but that would have meant completely overhauling the way that weapons work with each other. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remastered. It's still the game that you know and love, but it looks better, it feels a little bit better. It's really doing everything that it's advertised as, and not that much more, and not that much less. If you've never played Oblivion before, I would absolutely recommend picking this up and trying it out. I'm sure a lot of people started with Skyrim, but never really made their way backwards, but this is like the perfect time to do it. Oblivion was just like a game of its era. The vibes of its story, of its art direction, of its music are just completely different from all of the other entries, and it still feels really special to this day. I loved the original version of this game, I probably spent hundreds of hours inside of it, and I really enjoy the amount of work that Virtuos has put into this remaster. It's kind of reinvigorated the audience around the Elder Scrolls series, and reminded me just how much I loved investing my time inside this world.